Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist? Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris.
And I'm Rob.
And today we are going to be talking about the most interesting and dangerous man in professional wrestling. We are going to be talking about New Jack, a man who probably should have gone to prison lots of times, but
I think if he
somehow he did not.
If he wasn't a professional wrestler, he would have absolutely been like a mass murderer or a gang member or something.
Yeah, the dude definitely found a home for himself.
Yeah.
And the only job that would be able to take him. So good for him for finding his calling. Not many people really do find it, but New Jack seemed to.
Yes.
And thrive in a very bizarre way. Depending on who you are.
Yeah.
The term thrive can be applied heavily or loosely, depending on who you are.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll be examining New Jack today. But if you don't know what we are and what we do, this is your first time checking out the show, we are Why Does This Exist? We're a podcast that talks about the weirdest in pop culture, whether it's a wrestler like we're about to talk about, or a TV show like we did last week when we re-evaluated the PJs, or any musical act like we did with Green Jelly a few weeks ago, or anything else for that matter. If it's weird, we'll talk about it. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you already know what's going on, so you could skip ahead a little bit. But if you're new here, you can support the show a number of ways. One of them is by listening to it the way that you are now. But you can also support us on social media. I think we're on Twitter still, or X. I'm not even sure. Twitter.com or x.com/WDTEpod. Facebook, facebook.com/Why Does This Exist? Or you can just go to our YouTube channel. It's just, you go to the channel. It's Why Does This Exist with a question mark. Find us, subscribe to all those nice things so that, you know, all the other stuff that can happen happens and our dreams can come true. You can also send us an email over to whydoesthisexistshow@gmail.com and tell us what you think of the program or give us some ideas for something else to talk about. But the best way to support us is by giving us your money. Just hold cold, hard cash so that way we can achieve our financial dreams and move to an island all by itself. 2 islands, really. I'll have one, you can have the other, and well, maybe we'll let Tony live on the island remotely every once in a while. He writes for us. He does a lot of things for our Patreon, which is one of the means that you can supply us with cash. That's patreon.com/Why Does This Exist? You can also buy us coffee physically if you know who we are and where we live, which that may or may not be weird. But you can also do that on this site called Buy Me a Coffee, buymeacoffee.com/Why Does This Exist? Or you can now support us on Spreaker, which is our home and has been our podcasting home for about 2 years now. We love it. The good people are always trying to make things just go a little bit smoother for us. So you could do that by just Spreaker.com/podcast/Why Does This Exist? --5418632/support. Yeah, I know that's a lot. Don't worry about it. The links are in the descriptions. You could just click and give us money. If you do for any of those things, we'll let you into the Discord server. You can chat with us. You could even be on a show. There's a bunch of the possibilities are endless, folks. But that's the news. Here's the weather. You're now about to witness the strength of street knowledge from a ragtag group of rogues. So let's get on with the goddamn show. Why don't you tell the people about New Jack, Rob?
All right. Well, New Jack was born Jerome Young, January 3rd, 1963, in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I think you had, as you had said before, he had a very, or I don't know if he even mentioned this in the intro, but he had a very rough upbringing. He witnessed when he was 5 years old, his mother get stabbed multiple times by his father, who accused her of sleeping with other men. Um, and then after that incident, 5 months later, he also shot her in the leg as she was trying to leave with the young New Jack. His father later died of a heart attack, and he spent the rest of his childhood moving around with his mother, in abject poverty, basically just, dodging evictions left and right,
Jesus.
moving across the South. So not a very
It's
good upbringing.
No, and not a surprise when you see how, how like crazy and violent New Jack was in the ring.
Yes. Yeah.
And why he was just so angry, and also he liked cocaine a lot, which
Yeah.
that'll explain quite a few things as well from that
Yeah.
childhood. I mean, even he said it in the Dark Side of the Ring episode where like he's explaining what happened, and he's just like says something to the effect of like, of course, like how could you be surprised that I'm this messed up?
Yeah. He also, in his teenage years, began robbing local stores and gas stations, and he was briefly sent to prison for a couple of years for robbery. Um, and after release from prison, he worked short time as a truck driver, and then later as a bounty hunter, allegedly. I don't think it was ever confirmed if he was actually a bounty hunter or not. That was kind of just like the rumor, because
Oh, I
like
have no idea. He
I believe it was Jim Cornette who said that, you could listen to New Jack, his like life story, and you wouldn't even know if he was actually telling you the truth or not,
Yeah, you
because he was
really.
just that crazy. The guy was pretty much always in character as New Jack.
Oh yeah.
Uh, so when he got into professional wrestling, in the early '90s, he trained under Ray Candy, and worked mostly in the South, in the Southern territories, like Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Of course, this is still kind of during the territories era. Like at this point, like
I would say like on the last legs of the territories,
yeah,
really.
yeah. At this point, it really WWE Vince had been already buying up what was left of the territories, and
Yeah. And then you had
WCW kind of
WCW rating everything.
yeah, WCW kind of formed out of the Southern territories, and
Yeah. Well, I mean, between the two of them, they were both raiding every
yeah. Oh,
territory and like just effectively killing them all off.
yes.
Because I
Uh,
mean, how could like the NWA at this point was starting to really become a shell of itself?
yes. Yeah. Well, and the problem is that you couldn't beat WWE and WCW, who both had TV deals. WWE, of course, up in the Northeast had networks, and then of course WCW was owned by Ted Turner, so he could just put it on one of his own networks. So the territories just couldn't compete because they were basically like on just like local TV stations, and they didn't have the nationwide coverage that the WWF at the time, and now WWE and WCW had. So that but that's a story for another day. Um. Anyway, so New Jack, he actually got the name from the 1991 film New Jack City. He just liked the whole like idea of it, and like thought it was like a cool name, so he picked it as New Jack.
I mean, it's a pretty
Um,
cool movie.
yeah, and he basically, after joining Smoky Mountain Wrestling with, Jim Cornette hired him. He formed a tag team with Mustafa Syed named the Gangstas, and became the perfect heel for the Southern Territory because,
Oh, that's crazy. How like just by the way, like I mean, nobody tells it better than Jim Cornette when when they're
yes,
explaining it. But like, if you ever just watch a promo from Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and you'll see exactly why
yes,
they were perfect for that era. But like,
yeah,
I
uh,
mean, this was during like this was during a crazy time in America too,
Yeah,
where
well, it
like
was, you had
it was O.J. Simpson's
you had
whole trial
recent
going on,
well, you recently had
and
the Rodney King
yes,
situation. You had the LA riots because of that. And then the OJ Simpson trial like shortly after that. And of course at this point everyone was like out for blood because, the whole Rodney King thing, they thought OJ was being framed, so you had, African Americans like on OJ's side, you had white Americans uh on that, not on OJ's side, on the opposite side, thinking,
yeah,
thinking OJ was gonna be guilty,
there was a
African
huge
Americans.
racial divide. I mean,
Yeah,
even with the Rodney King riots,
yes.
like
Well, and
you
that's why
had
it was still fresh in everyone's mind. And so
yeah,
like when the OJ trial started, it was like, a lot of people thought that OJ was just being persecuted because he was black. Even though obviously, we all know now that he very clearly did kill his wife. I mean, I don't care what anybody says. He had lost in the
allegedly,
civil suit, and
allegedly,
allegedly, but we all know it's true. Yeah, his fucking team of lawyers was brilliant, but
yes,
and he got away with murder. But uh New Jack would go on TV on these promos and basically say like, he would praise OJ Simpson and say like, yeah, you did a good job. You got two of them. That's, and basically like, all this like very like anti-white, like talk and like kind of build himself as like almost like a black nationalist.
right.
And
Meanwhile, Smoky Mountain Wrestling is in Louisville, Kentucky, so
yes,
they're in
the
the
heart of
heart
the
of
South.
like of the South.
Yes.
So New Jack saying all that stuff on like on like you know regional television, that's enough for people to get. I mean, New Jack's whole thing was just like he was such a good like he was so good at staying in gimmick where like he he believed in what he was doing and it like really got over. I mean, also it's weird because he was like his goal, you know, I mean, being a heel, like your goal is to make the crowd hate you, but like he was like extra. He was like
Yeah.
to like his goal was to like create racial like issues. His goal was to like to get um basically his goal was for like a bunch of white people in the audience to call him the N word repeatedly. Like that's
Yes.
what he wanted every night.
And often
And
that did happen.
yes, I mean he had to like get away from people because like he would get into fights with people or like people would like try to like like assault him in the back or they would try to stab him or whatever
There were
in the
times where he
parking
had
lot.
to be
He had to
escorted out of the arena by police with
oh
police
yeah.
protection because people literally wanted to kill him. And of course, this is
Yeah.
the time when kayfabe was still pretty intact. People were like, still thought that wrestling was 100% real and that he was just this person.
Yeah, they
So
had to I mean, they had to put a disclaimer on Smoky Mountain Wrestling that
yes,
just said Smoky Mountain the beliefs of the gangsters are not the beliefs of Smoky Mountain Wrestling
yeah, or the network, yeah,
or the network. Like they had to do all kinds of crazy like legal stuff. I mean, it made for great TV.
yes.
Like it made for great
It was
TV, and I'm sure they sold a ton of tickets.
he had the perfect heel heat, and you couldn't replicate
Yeah,
that.
no,
Uh,
it's especially for that time. He was
yes,
like he I mean, I like I don't want to say it, but it's like he was like a symbol of what was going on in the wrestling world. Like he was the perfect embodiment for what real America for what was going on in America.
yeah,
Like this was the perfect representation of what was going on
yeah,
or and like I think in like the Dark Side of the Ring episode, I think it was D'Lo Brown or one of the other guys was like saying, was like, OJ would get, I mean, OJ, oh my God, New Jack, New Jack would get on, New Jack would get on the mic and he would say what was on the minds of a lot of, on the minds of a lot of black people like then,
yes,
and like it's just so crazy because I like I feel like if they went in, because also like I feel like if they went into like a predominantly black area and did a Smoky Mountain show, the gangsters probably would have gotten the biggest baby face pop.
yeah. They probably would have been
It
over
probably
as
would have been
fuck.
the total opposite.
Yeah,
That it was great. I mean, Jim Cornette loved working with him because he would just walk in and he would just say, "Hey, New Jack, why don't you go piss off? We need some promo time. Why don't you go piss off a bunch of white people?" And New Jack would just say, "How much time I got?"
Yeah. Yeah, and
Like,
it really pushed him to be more and more extreme and see how much more he could get away with, which
yeah.
really kind
Well,
of
well, the other
translated when
well, the
he
other thing with the gangsters was you had Mustafa Saeed,
yes.
who was just weird. So like he brought like this whole other aura to it where it was like New Jack is this crazy guy and then Mustafa is just like just doing this weird thing. I mean also he like he really liked he had like an odd drug choice. He used to smoke pencil shavings.
Oh yeah.
So who knows what that does to a person.
Probably nothing. Probably just
I
gives you lung damage.
I mean lung dab I don't know cuz like is he putting the lead from like is there lead from the pencil shavings in there?
Well, technically it's not lead though, it's graphite.
Oh, what does graphite do to you?
No, probably nothing. I think it's just
I
like
don't
carbon.
I don't know. Or he was but this guy was into some weird stuff.
Yeah.
And it certainly showed.
Yeah. Uh
But like it created this like disturbing it created this disturbing thing, but it was also like looking back at it now, it's disturbing and funny at the same time because you're just like, "Oh my God. How could they like how did they like how are they alive or like how did they live long enough as long as they did after you're watching some of this stuff like understanding like the full scope of the time period and everything just
yes.
like and where they were is just it's amazing.
Well, they got lucky that they, didn't like get killed because they
Oh
probably could have
yeah.
very easily done it.
Oh
Uh
yeah. I
and
mean
like I said, they had to be escorted out of the building by police and out of the arena by police to, for their own safety several
yeah.
times.
I mean the other thing is like the reaction like when you mention New Jack to anybody like anywhere if you mention New Jack if you name New Jack anywhere people who know have the same reaction every single time. Like if somebody doesn't know who he is, then then like they're like who is New Jack and then you have to explain it. But if a person knows who New Jack is, they the minute that you mention him, they say, "Oh shit," and they
Yeah.
start laughing and it's like it's the same reaction every single time with any person. It's just it's so funny, but it's also just like this like that's how crazy New Jack is.
Yeah. And it became kind of a problem for him in Smoky Mountain Wrestling because he really didn't get along with a lot of the locker room
Oh, I'm
because he was so
sure.
extreme. It really didn't like he eventually in the mid 90s joined ECW, and that's kind of where he really found his like niche and where like he kind of found his family because like the ECW locker room was just a whole bunch of like misfits and
Yeah.
crazy guys, and it was like really like the perfect environment for New Jack. It became like this kind of like dysfunctional family for him. Uh
Yeah.
and
Well, because
you
everybody
know,
was a maniac. Most of them were not
yes.
trained well.
No, yeah, and most of them
Um.
also did heavy drugs.
Oh yeah, drug use was rampant in the place. Well, I mean, in the when you look at the ECW documentary, The Rise and Fall, which is one of the best ones that WWE's ever done, still.
Yeah.
Um, I think it was Joey Styles who says it, where everybody was partying like rock stars, but nobody was making that kind of money. So they were
No.
destroying their bodies and they were doing all kinds of like crazy drugs,
Yeah.
but like they were all broke.
And it's hilarious because like New Jack ultimately went to ECW because he was going to make more money going into ECW. So it's like how poorly was he getting paid in Smoky Mountain Wrestling that ECW was like a big increase in his paycheck.
Well, I don't know. Or like was Smoky Mountains paid halfway decent at the time, but then like I don't know because this was the 90s. There was a lot of money going around in the 90s for a
Well,
while.
yeah. And well, allegedly from what I've heard from other wrestlers doing shoot interviews is that Heyman would promise lots of money, but when they got the checks were fucking made of rubber.
Well, that too. That's another thing. I mean, towards the end of ECW, yeah, for sure.
Yes.
In the earlier days, I don't know. Maybe there was enough money coming in to keep him happy,
I
and
think,
then it
I
got
mean,
to a point where he was robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it was obvious.
yeah, in the early days, they probably were making so much money because it was underground enough that it wasn't like scaring or venues away, but like it was popular enough that they would make a decent purse at the door, you know.
Right.
And I think, ironically, one of New Jack's incidents actually caused possibly the downfall of ECW because it really scared
Oh,
promoters away.
for sure. That
And
was
we'll get to that in a little bit. The
yeah.
mass transit incident.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely the first nail in the coffin.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a huge thing because, especially when the court case happened around it, because they got so much publicity and it became so much of a media circus that it kind of be like. And again, at this time, like, you already professional wrestling was already starting to get in the headlines because you had, the big steroid trial in the early '90s with Vince McMahon. You had the Owen Hart, the death of Owen Hart, which was a huge thing at the time.
Right. And
Uh,
then and then every so often there would be a giant news reporting about somebody either getting severely injured,
yes.
who was like doing an amateur like indie wrestling thingy in like somebody's backyard, or
Hmm.
somebody who or some poor kids who were
Yes.
imitating wrestling, and one of them and it resulted in a fatal accident.
Yeah, which happened numerous
So
times, and it was.
yeah,
And I don't think it really happened like so often that, like, kids were dying left and right. I think it just happened the times that it did happen. It became so publicized because the media was really looking for a devil to put the blame on, and professional wrestling was like the perfect thing because
sure.
it was always viewed as kind of like this underground, like, lowbrow kind of form of entertainment, because of its roots in like the circus and stuff like that.
Right.
And professional wrestlers were kind of always seen as like carnies, these big, like, muscular brutes that were like stupid, and all they did was like they were just like did violence to each other, and
Right. Well,
uh
also in the 90s, like wrestling was probably at its most violent on TV.
oh yeah,
I mean,
well,
even
definitely with ECW.
early, well, ECW for sure. I mean, like through the 90s to early 2000s, I would say up until the Chris Benoit incident, wrestling
Yeah.
was like constantly pushing the envelope and getting more and more violent.
Yes.
Where once the Chris Benoit situation happened, then it started getting everything started getting a lot more tame, at least on like mainstream wrestling.
Yes.
Um, Indie wrestling followed in ECW's footsteps a lot, which I think the problem, well, as great as ECW was, and it was like such a perfect shot in the arm for 90s pro wrestling and
Yeah.
such a great alternative for WCW WWF
Hmm.
then WWF. Um, it also because of how extreme it was, this probably set back like it set back wrestling a few generations because it started making because other aspiring wrestlers, that's the type of wrestling that they wanted to do. They
Yeah.
wanted to only do extreme stuff. And so many indie startup promotions wanted to emulate
Yeah.
that it's like it it almost it almost cheapened wrestling in a way because
I, I
because
think
the more extreme they got and how frequent they had to show more extreme types of wrestling, the more like the more watered down it felt, and the less that anything like the less of an impact it made, the more times you saw it, and they
yeah.
had to keep pushing that envelope
Well,
to the point where you're seeing thumbtacks and things like that,
and well,
and
EC,
all kinds of crazy stuff.
it was different when ECW was doing it because they were pushing the envelope and there was no one else doing it at the time. Like they were like the only ones. Like if you wanted
Right.
to see an extreme hardcore match, you went to an ECW show. And then, after ECW fell and, there was kind of like a bit of a vacuum for a couple of years where there wasn't really much. And then you had promotions like CZW and come up. And CZW, I think, just kind of took it like way over that. It's like they jumped the shark in
They
terms
really
of how
did.
extreme. Like, it's like when you have guys come into the ring with like weed whackers and other like care tools to like hit someone with a weed whacker and like literally like turn the weed whacker on and like friggin' use it against somebody. It's like you're getting a little too over the top at that point. It's like
Yeah.
obviously ECW pushed the envelope. You had, bats wrapped in barbed wire. You had like barbed wire death matches and
Well, you
uh,
had fans bringing weapons in and
yes,
standing in the front row and giving people weapons to use on the other guy.
yeah,
Like there was one guy who would bring a cheese grater and they would use it.
yeah. But it got really over the top in CZW, and I think that it's kind of like they're trying too hard to be the new ECW, and it's like you can't capture that magic because it was just the time in wrestling where like they were filling a niche that wasn't being filled. And
Right. And now everybody does it.
exactly. So and like I said, ECW was the perfect spot for New Jack because he was like the one to push the envelope. He wanted to constantly, one up everybody and do something that nobody had ever seen before.
Right.
And
Like he would
he
constantly dive off of the higher objects.
yes. Yes, he would like first it was like I think it was Cornette who said this in the documentary, like, first it was the 10-foot like balcony, then the 15-foot balcony, then he needed to go off a 20-foot balcony. And it was like, he
And then
just
this
kept pushing the
meanwhile, and
envelope.
this whole time, like New Jack, prior to his match, he's like drinking vodka and like snorting coke.
Yeah, he was
So,
very openly snorting coke. He would be like,
oh
"Yeah,
yeah,
I would do it." Like he didn't even care. Like he was like, "Yeah, I would snort coke and then go out high," and that was it. That was what we did. And honestly, that was the ECW locker room. Like you see
yeah.
guys like Sandman who was drinking beers very obviously, and also probably doing other hard drugs. I saw him recently in a shoot interview, and he looked awful. Like you could tell that he'd been doing, either heroin or meth or something because his skin was all like
Ugh.
pockmarked and stuff, and it was like really bad. But like a lot of the guys were doing it, and it wasn't every single person. Like you had guys like RVD, which he was just a huge pothead. That's all he did was smoke
Yeah,
weed all the time.
that's fine.
Yeah. But a lot of the other guys were doing a lot of harder stuff, and it's very like Balls Mahoney and everybody doing way harder stuff, and New Jack doing coke, and so it was really it was like his place, and somewhat to also his detriment because as he got more and more extreme, it like then you had the situation when he was climbing the Titantron and he fell off and the wrestler he was facing fell on top of him
I think it
like
was
and
Vic.
and
I think
his
it was Vic Grimes.
yeah, I believe so. And basically fell on his head, and his head got like smashed between Vic Grimes and the concrete floor, which fractured his skull. And allegedly, I've been told he actually had like brain fluid leaking out of his ears and
Oh my
became blind
god.
in one eye and permanently blind. He still, to the day he died, could not see out of his right eye.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So it was you know like more and more extreme. And I've heard that he like eventually got Vic Grimes back for that because like he apparently didn't even call the next day to like see how he was doing or like apologize for like the botch. And a year later they had another match, and I think fucking New Jack just fucked him up completely and just
Well,
like
yeah, that became a part of the highlight reel for like ECW for like years.
yeah
It was everybody knows this spot where they're doing like they're doing like a scaffolding match or something like that, or
yeah
and there's a pyramid of tables, and like New Jack throws him off of the scaffolding, and he just barely he barely bounces off of the top rope to land back in the ring, but he like breaks through a bunch of tables. He almost goes outside of the ring, and he definitely would have died. And like when New Jack talks about that, he's like, "Yeah, I was trying to kill him." He's like, "I
Yeah.
couldn't." He's like, "I just didn't throw him far enough."
Yeah.
But freaking crazy.
Yeah. New
Where
Jack,
like he basically confesses this attempted murder.
and it's not the only time either that he's come close to killing somebody.
Oh yeah, no, this was not the possibly not the first, and definitely not the last.
Yes.
All times that we know of in a wrestling ring.
Well, I guess we can get to like the most famous time of his attempted murder, which of course is the mass transit incident. Um, the mass transit incident took place at an ECW show in November of 1996 in Revere, Massachusetts. And basically, the backstory is that this kid, New Jack, was actually not supposed to be in the match with this kid. So this kid, Mass Transit, who was known, he was his actual name was Eric Coolis, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Eric Coolis. Uh, came to the show and said that he was 21, and allegedly there were other wrestlers that vouched for him. So I guess they kind of like they said that he was, oh yeah, he's legit. He's trained with us. He is 21.
Well,
He,
he did this backyard wrestling thing
yeah,
with these two dwarves brothers who they're like he would just wrestle dwarves
yeah,
basically, and that's like a whole thing. Like anybody who doesn't watch pro wrestling, there is a sub or doesn't or like there's a subcategory of pro wrestling that, excuse me, is specifically midget wrestling.
yes,
And I think there's a documentary series about that now called like I think it's called like I forget what it's called, but I think it's called like Tiny Towers or something like that, or Tiny Terrors. I
mm-hmm.
forget what it is, but it's like it's like a midget pro wrestling show. Um, but yeah, that's a whole like sub category of pro wrestling, and that's also just been a thing for many years since the carnival days too. But yeah, they convinced like he brought the two other guys that he normally has matches with, and the three of they were gonna like they convinced Paul Heyman to give him a tryout basically,
Yeah,
and somehow they needed a replacement for New Jack's match because the gangsters were gonna go against Devon Dudley and Axel Rotten. Axel Rotten missed the show because I think there was a family emergency.
Yes.
And then they decided it was going to be, and then according to the dwarf that he was supposed to wrestle with, or one of them, Coolis went into business for himself and decided he doesn't need the other two guys, so he's not going to do the usual thing that he does. And that now he's going to be the big star, so he's going to have a wrestler. So supposedly, he told Paul Heyman that he was 21. He was legit trained by Killer Kowalski. Killer Kowalski trained Triple H, and he trained Triple H, China. I think I think Bobby Roode was one of the last people who trained with him.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of people. Killer Kowalski was an absolute legend and trained a lot of the best talents in the world.
Yes.
So he told everybody that he trained with him, and I guess his buddies like vouched for him and everything. And Paul Heyman let him decided, okay, we'll give him the tryout. He goes into business for himself, and for some weird reason, he decided to give him New Jack of all people.
Yeah.
But I don't know. In some way, it was somewhat karmic because you shouldn't lie.
Well, and also allegedly, what I've heard is that Mass Transit was also trying to dictate the match, which for people that don't know, if you're a new guy and you're going against a veteran, you do not dictate what goes on in the match. Unless you're saying like, yeah, I'll take this bump and I'll take this bump, Like, and then you could go over. Like, you don't say like, oh, I want to go over on a veteran when it's your first match. That's
No,
like
you never.
absolutely not proper etiquette at all.
No, you do whatever the vet. You let the vet lead, and you let
Yes.
the vet discuss. Oh, okay, here's the spots. Boom, boom, boom. We're gonna do this thing. Um, you know, uh, I'll work heel so you could have like, maybe you start off with a little bit of a comeback, but then I'll get you back. I'll toss you into the ropes, and then I'll hit you with my finish, and then that'll be the match.
Yeah.
Like, they'll just go over something quick like that. Um, and maybe the new guy might make a suggestion,
Yes.
but not anything that would be insulting. Like
Yeah, I think
maybe
the perfect
like
example of like what would actually happen is if you actually watch the movie The Wrestler, when when he's in the beginning when he's like wrestling, but right before they go out when he do the hardcore match, uh I think it was Necro Butcher was actually like, talking to Mickey Rourke's character Randy the Ram. It was like, okay, I want to do this. Are you okay with doing a stapler gun and stuff like that? And like just discussing like the kind of stuff that they're gonna do in the match, and like asking
right,
like, hey, are you okay with me doing this? Or I'm okay with you doing this to me, that kind of thing.
right, like letting the vet lead, and then
Yes.
just like interjecting and saying, "All right, would it be all right if?" And if they say no, then you don't do the spot.
Yes.
And you respect them, and you say, "Okay, well, thank you for the time. I'll
Yeah.
see you out there." And then
So
you go and do what you got to do.
yes.
This
So
kid,
yeah, he did not do that. He tried to dictate what he wanted to do in the match. So that immediately pisses New Jack off, someone who you don't want to piss off.
ever.
No. Yeah, ever. And then he also asks
I
if
feel like even his ghost will come back and start stabbing you.
yes. Uh he then asks if New Jack will blade him because he's never bladed before and he wants to bleed. And it's
Wrong
like
guy to ask that.
again, wrong guy to ask that. This is someone who will absolutely stab you. Like
Just
for
because.
yes. Now and you're asking him to do that. Like so so New Jack basically gave him what he wanted and absolutely kicked the shit out of him, like wrestled hard. It was more of a shoot fight than a wrestling match.
Yeah, New
Just
Jack just
beat the shit out of this kid. And then took a scalpel that he had hidden and started just cutting the fuck out of him. And I allegedly had severed several arteries in his forehead and absolutely like was bleeding everywhere.
yeah.
Um so
Yeah, I mean, I've seen bits of the tape. It's not pretty.
yeah.
It is.
And apparently at this point the kid's father finally decides he wants to stop the match and starts screaming that he's 17. So the medics come in, the kid's father starts calling him the n-word and stuff like that, which just pisses New Jack off more.
Yeah.
And at this point he shouts, I don't care if the motherfucker dies, he's white, I don't like white people, I don't like
Yeah.
people from Boston. And yeah, so it was just not a good situation. So
No.
uh,
Really, really awful for everybody involved.
yeah, except for New
Definitely.
Jack.
Yeah. I think I gotta rewatch the I gotta rewatch the Rise and Fall documentary, but I think when they make mention of this, I believe I mean, this is Paul Heyman, so take a lot of what he says with a grain of salt. He's always working.
Yeah,
Um, like he's kind of always playing a character. He's kind of always in gimmick, so you can't really tell. But I think he mentions that there was some kind of a TV deal or so. Like, I mean, it's hard to like really know if he's telling the truth, Paul Heyman, when he talks about that. But I think he like every time he mentions, "Oh, we were so close to getting this deal and then that fell through," or "We were so close to doing this thing and coming out of it and then that fell through." And that's kind of the story that's kind of his narrative for ECW the whole time is we were
yeah,
so close and then which if you ask any of the other ECW guys, you'll get mixed answers as to whether or not they believe anything was in place.
yeah.
Um but Anyway, this is I
Well,
think this is what I think in the documentary this is one of those times where Paul Heyman just says we were so close to getting that big TV deal and then the mass transit incident happens. I think it's one of those points, but I could be
well,
wrong. I'd have to
it did
rewatch
also.
it.
I mean, it did also lead to the barely legal pay per view being canceled initially. It was eventually
Hmm.
rescheduled, but not until months later. So it did certainly not help. Uh,
No, it killed a lot of momentum.
yeah, it absolutely did. And venues were afraid to put on ECW shows after this because they thought it would like degenerate into another mass transit incident, or like there was going
Sure.
to be like actually assault charges. And so uh New Jack was arrested and charged with assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, and had to go on trial. Um, so it really did turn into that. Um, Luckily, and that it goes back to like Heyman always being in character.
Yep.
They called Paul Heyman as a witness, and he testified in obviously in favor of New Jack, and kind of like put on like a show for the jury somewhat, and and
Right.
really kind of painted New Jack as like the victim, I guess kind of the victim. Um,
Somewhat, which is hilarious in like a messed up way. Well, also New Jack had gotten the other dwarf on his side too,
yes,
and he like because he promised him he was because like Kulas and his dad like when they were gonna take him to the hospital, like first of all his like the dwarves were like pissed that he like cut them out of what was supposed to be allegedly a deal for them too with the ECW tryout, and so they were already pissed about that, and then like they couldn't get a right like his father refused to drive them back home or to drive them to the hospital to drive them with him to the hospital to at least go halfway or whatever, and after that they were like okay fine well screw you I guess. So like New Jack got them on his side too, and he was like hey if you help me get these charges dropped or if you help me get acquitted of these things, then like you help me beat the case, I could try to figure something out for you. I could try to help you out. I could try to get you on WWE. And to his credit,
he actually
which
did.
he did, which
Yeah,
Paul Heyman was like the thing that people in ECW weren't aware of at the time, and maybe a few of them knew and a few of them didn't, was Paul Heyman kind of had like a direct lifeline to Vince McMahon, and Vince McMahon would somewhat fund ECW
yeah,
in a way. Like it's kind of weird. He had like secret payments going to him where he was like, I'll keep you afloat, but don't tell anybody about this.
yeah,
So for a while they kind of got by on that. And I guess through that connection was how they were able to get in touch. Was how he was able to get that set up.
yeah. Um, uh, so yeah, so the dwarfs obviously then testified. It was Tiny the Terrible, I believe, was specifically the one that who
Yeah,
became
that's the
on
guy.
New Jack's side, and so they vouched for him, and eventually it was it came out that he had lied about his age. His father vouched for him and said, yeah, he's trained with Killer Kowalski. He's 21.
Yeah.
So after all these lies came out, the jury immediately acquitted uh, New Jack. Then the family of Hercules also tried to sue New Jack for damages, and he was also found not liable in that. So it really became like kind of like a scam that these apparently the father was not very good of a character either, because not only did he let his 17-year-old son wrestle in an extreme hardcore wrestling promotion and lied for him to get him there, he
Well,
also tried to like exploit the legal system to try to get money out of it. So
I
he
don't
was just
understand.
fucked
I
up.
mean, I don't understand how you agree to that as a parent. I understand you wanting to support your child and wanting
Yeah.
to support their passions and help them follow their goals and their dreams and everything, but you have to be aware of what the hell they're doing. And I don't
Yes.
I guess maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. I don't really know. But I don't want my kid like if my 17-year-old kid shows me ECW and says, "Can I do that? There's a show next week. Can you try to get me on this?" I'm not telling them yes.
No, I'd be like, fuck no.
I'd be like, I would, yeah, my first thought would be, are you friggin' nuts? No, you
Yeah,
can't. No, you can't go. You can go to the show. I'll go to the show with you. We can watch this as a like as father and son, but or daughter. But no, you can't participate in this.
yeah,
Like, let's let's do something. Don't you have other things that you would like to do? We could try that.
yeah,
Or at least like wait until, or at least just say, well, you can, when you're old enough, if you want to get training, I can help you with that. We'll help you get training, but we're not going to just put you on this.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know where his head's at, the father.
Yeah,
But
it was just a very and Eric Koulis eventually died in May of 2002 uh because of complications from a gastric bypass surgery.
mm,
So obviously unrelated to the actual mass transit incident, but yeah,
yeah, but I'm sure the incident itself didn't help because I
right.
believe he did have like permanent damage in his forehead. He had an
Yeah, I believe he had
indent.
nerve damage from the
Yeah,
cuts.
yeah.
But you know, it's just,
Well, because normally when you blade, right, or if somebody would blade you, they'll cut you with like they'll either punch you like just above the eyebrow or somewhere so that you can like so that you could bleed
they'll
from
split your
there.
skin. Yeah.
Yeah, so they could either do that or if they take a blade, it's a cut down razor blade and you just kind of put like a little like you kind of put like a little indent across you, almost like a big paper cut really, or you kind of twist it a little bit. I haven't done this, by the way. I know I'm speaking like someone who has experience. No, I have never bladed in my life, but I've watched and listened to a lot of wrestling interviews, and they explain pretty well. Even in some books, they explain a pretty detailed way of how to do it. So, so you do that, and you either twist it or you run it across, and you create a gash over your eyebrow or something like that, or wherever you're comfortable. Um, and then you generally start bleeding because the sweat and the blood start mixing, and it creates an interesting photo op. We'll put it that way, and that's normally the proper way to do that. This is New Jack, who is pissed off already.
Yeah.
So New Jack just starts stabbing the poor bastard, and that's how that happened. And
Yeah.
then more things ensue. But this was not the first time he did this. Definitely the worst time, but New Jack has done this multiple times to other people.
Yeah.
And it's not in like major promotions, but in like a lot of smaller indie shows. Other
Yes.
people have like just in like these no name like high school gyms basically, where like someone either wants to have a match with him for some reason, or they they're doing a match with him, and something pissed him off, or the person pissed him off,
Yeah.
and
Well, there's another incident with there's a wrestler, Gypsy Joe, who was
yeah,
a veteran, 69-year-old veteran of wrestling, and his famous gimmick was that he didn't really feel pain, and that he was he could take any kind of punishment. So he was in a match in 2003 with New Jack, and his whole gimmick, because he's like this tough guy that doesn't feel pain, he's no selling all of New Jack's moves, which just pissed him off. And
yeah,
he was told, New Jack was told before the match that, like, hey, this guy is like tough and he doesn't feel pain, and like you could just do whatever. So of course you're telling this to New Jack, he's gonna go more and more extreme.
yeah. New Jack is gonna do whatever.
Yeah. So as he
The
gets,
problem is whatever is in the eye of the beholder,
oh,
and
well, exactly.
when the beholder is New Jack, maybe don't use the words "you can do whatever."
Yeah. So Jack's reply was apparently that he was gonna just kill this guy. Like, if he's like, you want me to, I'll do it. Like, and so the no selling pissed him off, and eventually Gypsy Joe headbutted him, and that pissed him off more. So he just decided to just legitimately beat the shit out of the 69-year-old man and
Jesus Christ.
started whipping him with a chain, hit him with a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire, like
Well, also
different
the
of the weapons.
crowd. Well, also the crowd was not appreciative of it either, and
No,
they started using slurs as well.
yeah, which just pissed him off more and
Yeah,
made him like attack him more. And so he just like legitimately beat the shit out of a 69-year-old man. Uh,
I'm surprised he didn't kill this guy.
yes. There was another incident in
Is Gypsy
2004.
Joe still alive?
I don't think he is.
I mean,
No,
if he
he's not.
was,
He
I mean, if
passed away
that,
in 2016.
oh, wow, we lived a lot longer than I would have expected after a match with New Jack.
Yeah,
I mean, but then again, if
I
New
guess
Jack
he was
can't,
tough as leather.
I guess so. But I mean, think about it. If New Jack can't kill you, what will?
Yeah. Um. So there's another incident in 2004. New Jack was wrestling a match with a guy called William Lane, and apparently Lane began actually like shoot hitting him during the match, which again is like, how
Don't
stupid can
do
you
that.
be to fucking like New Jack already has a very big reputation at this point. Why are you fucking like gonna like actually legitimately try to hurt him? Like he's gonna like wreck you. And New Jack pulled out a blade and started stabbing the shit out of the guy in the
Yeah.
middle of the wrestling match.
Yeah, I mean, on top of that, New Jack carries blades with him all the time. He
Yes.
always carried like a scalpel with him or something that he
Yes.
could cut somebody with just in case he needed to. Which I don't. You don't have to do that, but people do. People carry stuff with them, man.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, someone like New Jack, I'm not surprised because the guy probably
no,
had so
no,
many
I'm not.
enemies,
I'm not
just from
surprised
like,
either.
his like demeanor and the way he talked to people and stuff. I'm sure, so I'm sure he had like people that were out to get him.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that none of that would surprise me at all.
yeah. So he ended up stabbing this guy. He got some like felony charges brought against him, and apparently, uh, William Lane reached out to him and was like, "Hey, I'll drop the charges if you like go on tour with me and like we like do like matches." And I guess they did that. Like he ended up
No,
dropping the charges, and they like I
they
don't know if
didn't
like
do the tour. No, they didn't do the tour.
he didn't end up doing the tour,
New
but the guy
Jack
did end
told
up dropping the charges.
Yeah, New Jack convinced him while
Yeah,
he was like awaiting like his hearing or trial or whatever. New For some reason, like New Jack got out of every like possible like felony charge that he could have gotten.
yeah,
It's freaking crazy. I mean, even him, like I he's the luckiest guy he was the luckiest guy in the world when it came to that.
yeah,
Like that goes to show you that some like the universe had a soft spot for him for some weird reason.
yeah.
Like maybe his childhood was that bad
Like the
where,
universe was just afraid of pissing off New Jack.
well, yeah, the dude that's that's how scary New Jack was. He pissed like Mother Nature was terrified. The universe was like, we're not gonna talk about that. It's
Yeah,
kind of like if someone's it's like when somebody it's like when a kid asks their parents if it's like when the parent is trying to convince the child to believe in God or to be in religion or to like be somewhat religious or something like that, and a child asks the question, but mom or dad, if God is so good, why does he let bad things happen to good people, and why does he let why do good things happen to bad people, and how come bad people aren't always punished? Well, that's kind of like it's kind of a situation like that, except the parents, and then but imagine the kid asks, well, what about New Jack? And then the parent is just like, well, we don't talk about New Jack, son.
yeah.
But we just kind of New Jack is. How
uh,
did it's just it boggles my it can boggle your mind, but also it's New Jack. He's a force. He was
yeah.
a force.
He
But
was featured. So
but yeah. Anyway, so this guy, he convinced him to. He was facing criminal charges again. He convinces the guy there's like he's talking to the guy, and the guy is like, "Oh man, we need to go on tour and like just bring this crazy show like on the road. Like so many
Yep.
people like have come up to me and like all this stuff. Like apparently this guy was like having a moment in the sun after being stabbed by this guy, so he wants to like basically like ride out the momentum and get paid for it. And New Jack is like, okay, yeah, I would love to do that if you could, but I can't if you don't drop the charges because then I end up going to jail and we can't go on tour. And he convinces him to do it. The guy does it, and New Jack like leaves
Yeah.
immediately, and he never stepped foot back in Florida or
Yep.
wherever it was.
It was Florida.
Yeah, so it makes sense that these things happen in Florida.
Yeah.
But oh my God, it's just
Yep.
crazy. Now say what else you
Yeah.
were gonna say.
I was just gonna say that you know, after he kind of after ECW closed, he really only did he had a brief run in TNA, I believe, and really only did indie promotions after that. But he was also featured in the video game ECW Anarchy Rules, and also Backyard Wrestling 2, There Goes the Neighborhood, where he was actually featured on the cover.
Yeah,
Along with adult film actress Sunrise Adams and Violent J from Insane Clown Posse. So
that's
there
funny.
you go. Um,
I do remember that video game. They made two of them, but I
yeah,
never played the second one. The first
yeah,
one was what it was.
yeah. I heard they weren't great. Like they were okay, but they weren't great.
I remember like I remember I went with my friend to get it the day that it came out, and for some weird reason we all bought these like backyard wrestling DVDs, and we thought that they were so cool, and then we watched them like years later after like not watching them for a long time and just being like, why did we ever buy this shit? This is awful.
Yeah,
This is like it's just so stupid. Um but yeah, I remember like we were playing the game, we thought it was cool because of how much blood there was and how like destructible the environment was, but it got old really quickly.
yeah,
But
yeah. It was.
New
I
Jack did not end up going into the WWE ECW as it's known when WWE bought it and like rebranded it and ran it into the ground. And he also wasn't like famously he wasn't in the ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view, and like it seems pretty obvious that they felt that he was too risky to
Yes.
do. And Paul Heyman, I'm sure, was well, when he's talked about it, he was like, well, there were a lot of preppy white people in WWE, and they didn't really understand New Jack, and which is a nice way of just saying they they looked at New Jack and they said hard pass after knowing about all the other things that like all of his other controversies.
Yeah.
Or Paul Heyman was just like, or for all we know, Paul Heyman was handpicking the guys that he would bring into WWE, and he was like, yeah, it just, and he was just like, there's no way that it's gonna work with New Jack. As much as I want to bring him, there's no way that I could do this.
Yeah.
Which,
Oh, imagine New Jack was in the ring when fucking JBL started going off the friggin' reservation
oh, he would have
and
stabbed
beating the shit.
JBL.
He would have fucking killed
He would
JBL.
have, yeah, he may have killed JBL. Like on pay per view,
Yes.
like, yeah, can't do that.
No.
So, as as much as I would have, as much as I think it would have been entertaining and enjoyable to see New Jack in WWE, probably the right call not to bring him in.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Um. So yeah, New Jack's he continued to do like shoot interviews. And
I mean,
obviously
his
did.
promos and shoot interviews were probably the best thing about New Jack. He was
Oh yeah,
really good with promos.
he would just go off the cuff. He didn't even care.
Yeah,
He
and
was
you bought it
famously
too.
very much against the Chris Benoit situation. He
Yeah,
said that anybody that defends Chris Benoit is like a complete hypocrite, and there's no excuse for what he had done. That was pretty prominent. He also, he like he said, he just did a lot of interviews later on in life. His health really started to fail in his final years.
I mean, all that cocaine abuse
Yeah, the cocaine abuse, the
and
injuries he had
anything,
sustained over the years.
right? Plus anything else that he had done, and I mean, I don't know how much money this guy was like pulling in annually, but I can't imagine it was that much.
Yeah,
So, like, and I doubt that he had any health insurance
no,
or whatever health insurance he had. It probably wasn't good. He's probably going to like clinics a lot to
yeah,
get treated, and there you get the service, you get whatever you get,
yeah,
and so I can't. I'm sure that he was never treated for the fractured skull,
no.
and
If he was,
among
it was
other
like
things.
not the proper treatment. Um,
Yeah, so I don't even know. It's amazing that he even lived to be 60.
yeah,
Right? Was he
uh,
60 or was he 50
58.
something?
Yeah,
58.
yeah,
Sorry.
close to
Still
60.
still crazy enough that he even lived to be that old,
Yeah.
considering everything that he like
Well,
put
oh,
himself
and
through.
allegedly Tommy a Dreamer had reached out to him in his later years, and the Steve he wanted to do a match for the House of Hardcore, and
Yeah.
he New Jack basically said he can't. He was bedridden because he had he had major heart problems, and his vision was like completely fucked. He couldn't see. Um,
Jesus.
so it was he kind of lived by the sword and died by the sword in a way, just
Yeah.
because of the abuse he put on his body over the years. And I mean, you could look, you look at a picture of New Jack, you look at his forehead, it's just all scarred up from like the amount of times he's been hit and bladed. It's just like it looked like fucking like like scrambled eggs almost or something on his forehead.
Jesus.
You know. So it's just the guy put his
Yeah.
body through so much abuse, and eventually he caught up with him,
Yeah.
and he passed away in May of 2021 of a heart attack. And you know that thus ends the tale of the New Jack.
Yes. Also, believe it or not, New Jack had 5 children.
Yep.
Um
He
that
apparently
is
had or was in brief relationship with Terry Reynolds as well.
wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I know he had said that on shoot interviews, but I wasn't sure whether or not it was true, but he said some pretty crazy stuff about what Terry's into. I
Yeah.
don't know how true that stuff is, but pretty interesting. Um, but yeah, the guy. I mean, what else can you say? He.
Yep.
What I know you normally say that, but that's really
Yeah. I
the
mean
guy
the
lived.
guy
The guy lived a crazy life.
he
He
did.
he did live and die by the sword, as you said. There's nothing else that you could say.
Yeah, and like I said in the beginning, the way he was brought up and his childhood, I think he kind of lucked out finding wrestling because I think he really would have ended up being some kind of like career criminal because he it just like had such a shitty situation growing up,
Yeah, I mean, how do
and
you?
did briefly turn to crime, but luckily, once he was released, was able to find professional wrestling and turn his life around.
Yeah,
And he just he's a legend. He's you know people you think to hardcore wrestling, what the Mount Rushmore of hardcore wrestling, and New Jack is definitely featured prominently in that lineup.
oh yeah, he might be the number of hardcore wrestling. It's an odd Rushmore, I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
It's probably Terry Funk, Mick Foley, New Jack, and somebody else,
Sandman or Tommy Dreamer maybe.
I guess. Or to some people, maybe Necro
Sabu.
Butcher's on there for some reason. Yeah, you could put Sabu on that Rushmore.
Yeah,
I wouldn't. That would work. You probably need 10 guys
yeah, there'd
because
probably be
it's
more than
just
4 heads.
yeah. Just it wouldn't be a clean Rushmore either. They'd be stacked on top of each other,
Yeah,
like just in like a messed up pyramid.
yeah,
And for some reason, it's constantly bleeding.
yeah. There's just like a river of blood running
They're
out.
just they're just it's like built off of a guy or like a volcano. So
Yeah,
it's like a volcanic geyser that just keeps erupting over the faces.
yeah,
Yeah, but oh man, the guy. If you want to look at somebody who, if you want to if you want to look up the definition of pushing the envelope, just just look at a picture of New Jack.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know. But yeah, I mean, even in the Dark Side of the Ring documentary, he just said he wants to go out as like an old man. He wanted to go out like an old man, just like snorting cocaine in his wheelchair,
Yep.
which may have been how he died.
I would imagine it
I
probably might
I
have been.
don't. It very well could have been. Um, that's New Jack for you. Who do you think would play him in a movie
Oh,
in
that's
in the
tough.
New Jack biopic? Do we get peak Wesley Snipes?
Yeah. Wesley
Who
Snipes at
who
his peak.
else?
Samuel L. Jackson, maybe.
Yeah, I could see Samuel L. Jackson.
Samuel Jackson can play a bad motherfucker pretty good, so.
Yeah, so I think those two guys need to be
Or
contenders.
in terms of like looks, I think like LL Cool J probably looks the closest to New Jack.
Yeah, oh, that would be interesting.
Yeah,
I don't.
but
Yeah, I don't know. I would love to. I would love to see a biopic of New Jack. Why can't we get that? Forget
yeah,
about the Von Erichs. Let's get the New Jack biopic.
yeah, let's get it. Yeah, I would be down for it.
I would. I would show that to everybody. I would watch that multiple times.
Uh-huh.
I would push for an Academy Award for the New Jack biopic.
Well, maybe maybe the Von Erichs one will spawn a whole new generation of wrestler biopics, and we'll get a New Jack one eventually. I mean,
I
just the
hope.
story of ECW in general would be a great film.
Oh yeah,
Just like the crazy depravity and the extreme, and the amount of like drugs that were done, and all the craziness that surrounded ECW, and the drama. It would be a great movie.
yeah. I mean, if we were to get like a more modern, if we were to get like a more modern guy to be New Jack, would we go with Michael B. Jordan? Just because he's like,
Yeah,
just
I could
because
see
he's like
Michael.
the hot young go-to guy to be
Yeah,
like young New Jack.
yeah, I could see Michael B. Jordan as a young New Jack.
Yeah. Who plays Mustafa?
I don't know. That's a good one. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah. The only name I can think of right now, and this is bad, is Jonathan Majors, but that ain't happening.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know. Maybe like maybe it does happen because that's all he could get. I don't know. But that's there's got to be somebody that I can't
Yeah.
think of.
Yeah. Let me see.
I mean, Mustafa's a weird guy, but I'm sure you could find like somebody like I'm sure there's somebody that we could think of.
Yeah, it would be tough. Terry Crews maybe. Terry Crews might be a little too old.
No, he's too old. I'm trying to think of who would. Yeah, there's somebody that you could pick. I just.
Honestly, Michael B. Jordan might even be better as Mustafa.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah.
I can see it a little bit.
Get somebody else to play New Jack.
Yeah, we might need to get somebody else to play New Jack of like a modern guy. Because like Sam Jackson could be old New Jack or like
Yeah.
modern New Jack. LL Cool J too, but
LL Cool J is
Ooh.
probably a little too old
He's
to play.
no, I
a
mean
younger.
no, that's what I mean. He would be like older New Jack too.
Yeah.
Or like middle-aged New Jack. Well, not that he really lived to be that old.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's hard. Who plays New Jack of like the current?
Yeah, it's tough. Maybe what's his name? Friggin'
Not
guy who played the
Donald Glover.
Falcon. The guy who played the Falcon. Anthony Mackie, is that his name?
You think Anthony Mackie? I don't know. I think he's too small. He'd have to bulk up a bit.
Well, I mean, he's a Hollywood actor. They can friggin'
This is
get
true.
trained to do. Someone could come in and train that guy and bulk him
Yeah.
up.
Oh, here's another guy. You could get Ving Rhames to be New Jack too.
That's true.
Maybe not young New Jack though.
No, yeah, Ving Rhames is
You
probably
don't
too
get
old.
young New Jack. Man, it's hard to pick young New Jack. Tyrese maybe? Because Tyrese I think is in his 40s, but like that guy doesn't age.
Yeah. Yeah, could be.
Yeah, maybe you get Tyrese. I don't know. It's hard.
See, the thing about New Jack is that he's so craggly from all like the cuts and
I
beatings that he
know.
took.
I
It could
know.
probably, you could probably get an older actor to pass as a younger New Jack, and it would work.
You probably could. Well, that's why I'm thinking Ving Rhames.
Yeah.
It could work. I mean, New Jack wasn't like ripped like that, but you know what?
No.
It's Hollywood. Like just like let him be let him look at the let's get the best possible look for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my pick. We get Ving Rhames to play New Jack in the
All right.
biopic.
All right.
All right, and on that note, this has been Why Does This Exist? I've been Chris.
And I've been Rob.
And remember, question everything.
Good night, everybody.
Oh, one other note. When you go to bed tonight, just remember, New Jack is always watching.